my name is Gudrun from GE Designs and welcome to our Harmony Quilt Along. Good morning from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and thank you all for being here with me live, with us live. I am looking forward to an amazing day, and I've been seeing everybody pop in from all over the world. Hi, India. Hi, New Zealand, if you're still awake. Australia, Canada, Sweden, Norway, UK, Iceland. I know you're all with me, and I just wanted to send a shout out. This is so special for us, and I cannot wait to share this day with you. So just imagine we're all together, even though we're apart. This is going to be a day to remember, and we're going to have something to show for it, an amazing quilt. Maybe not by the end of the day, but we're going to get far along, and let's just enjoy the process and take it all in. So how this works, this is my first live session. There will be 5 throughout the day. So all of these live sessions we're doing live both on Facebook and on YouTube, but those videos will be available forever in both places. So if we get disconnected, if something happens with technology, which can happen, we're gonna knock on wood and hope it doesn't. Just know that we will continue recording. So if you do get disconnected, we will continue recording and then we will post the videos afterwards. But hopefully we can all stick it out and technology will be on our side. So the videos, like I said, will be available later. But and that is for a reason, because I want you to go back to watch again and again the demos. Now, thank you so much for all of your messages, your posts, and your notes. It's been a great experience connecting people all over the world and sharing the experience already, kind of building up to this day. Now, quilting and quilters are just the best, really, truly, because it's been wonderful seeing everybody posting their fabric choices and maybe a possible meaning behind their choices. Seeing the group on Facebook in particular, seeing the group acknowledge everybody's choices, listen without judgment, and already learning new things. Amazing things can be accomplished if we just listen to each other's voices, really hear what is being said, and learn from it. We may not always agree with everyone's and others' life choices, but we can still show compassion and kindness, and most likely gain something from it. Because hearing is giving, so we can all enjoy that gift because it comes back tenfold. I tell you that from experience. So, but today is also about having some fun. We are all going to be doing what we love doing, making quilts. So hopefully learning a few tricks along the way. So I just want everybody to take a deep breath. And let's enjoy the day. Let all the stress go, everything that's going around around us, and we're just going to be here, all together, but in our favorite places, harmony, in our sewing space. Yes, harmony. So make sure to check in with the comments on both Facebook and YouTube. Say hi, say where you're tuning in from, post your name, and show us that you're excited to be here. And keep commenting throughout. Ask questions. I know we're never going to be able to get to everybody's questions, but we try and go through between the segments and answer anything that I didn't kind of address in the video. I try and answer those questions so that you can be fully with us. There's also a benefit from more comments. Of course, we're going to have amazing giveaways throughout the day. We are picking random winners from each live session, both from Facebook and YouTube, and you're going to get some great prizes. GE Designs, of course, we have our prizes for you, but also we are so honored to be sponsored by Moda Fabrics. So they have sent us some great goodies that will be a part of our prize packages today. So make sure the more you comment, the more chances that you're going to get randomly picked. So if you haven't found things, if you're looking for certain things, for example, where's the pattern, where do I find the recipes or the playlist or anything regarding the sew along or the quilt along, go to my blog. So the website, gequiltdesigns.com, and under the blog tab, we have a Harmony Quilt Along blog post that has links to all the information. So for example, last Tipsy Tuesday, I showed you a little cutting demo on cutting your background. Now I'm gonna just go lightly into that today, but I encourage you, if you didn't see it last Tuesday, I have put a link right on the blog right to that video. So you can go after we're done with our first live segment and watch that first if you haven't cut your background and get some tips on that. And then you're kind of ready to go. So that is one addition I added today, and there will be more added throughout. So that is also where we will have links right on the blog to each of these segments. So once the segment is done and you go and work and you feel like you need to go and watch it again, just hop on over to the blog, because there will be a link there that's easy to find. Everything will be easy to find. Now we're going to have some guests, special guests throughout the day. The two guests that I'm going to tell you about. The first up is Lyric Kinnard, the amazing art quilter teacher extraordinaire and a friend. So I met Lyric when we were teaching together a year ago or 2 years ago. I'm gonna have to ask her to see exactly when that was. Time is, so messed up in my head these days. But she is an amazing art quilter. Like I said, she's doing a lot of teaching still, even virtually, and so I can't wait to chat with her. And our second guest today is the amazing Robin Pickens, fabric designer extraordinaire for Moda, and she is going to join us a little bit later because she's on the West Coast, so it's super early right now. But she'll be with us later today and to talk about her fabrics, her process, how she got into designing fabric versus just her artwork. So I can't wait to chat with her as well. Now, before we go into our sewing demo, I wanted to just make sure that you take it easy today. This is not a pressure or a stress-inducing day where you need to keep up with anybody. You're just going to enjoy the journey. So I will demonstrate parts of the pattern, and then you should just watch the video, and then once we're going off the air, then you should go and do that step. The videos are always there to go back to. So have your pattern next to you, walk through the steps. As we're watching the live, it's always good to have your pattern, kind of walk it through. It kind of helps connect the dots, so to speak. And then don't think that you're going to get your whole quilt finished today. Don't put that pressure on right now. But I always say, when I'm working on blocks, I work on a few at a time. I never do all of my blocks at a time because it becomes repetitive, and I feel like I can get somewhere if I work on a few at a time. So I'm going to talk about that later, give you suggestions on how to proceed with that. But main thing is relieve all stress. It's just going to be fun. So first up, we're going to just dive into it. Do we have any questions? Is everybody excited? I know we've been putting some comments up on the screen. No big questions. If we're ready to roll, I think I am ready to roll. So we are going to start by I'm just going to show you a little bit on the cutting. So our background, it's great to have that all cut before, which is why I posted the cutting instructions earlier this week, and I did the cutting demo on Tuesday. Now, if you don't have that done, like I said, go back to the Tipsy Tuesday video and check that out. But otherwise, I just want to show you quickly, if you're new to the Stripology Rulers, when you're cutting full width yardage, you want to fold it in half. So I just kind of took a part of my background fabric. I am using a yarn dyed woven fabric, which is different because it's not printed, so the actual threads are colored, and so there's this little texture in it. This is a pepper cotton taupe color. So what you want to do is you have your bolt fold. If it came off the bolt pretty straight, I just take my bolt fold after I press my fabric. And I did talk about in that show on Tuesday that I treated my fabrics with a little bit of best press or magic sizing, my background fabric, because woven fabrics are a little bit stretchier, but I recommend it for any fabric because we're going to be cutting it on the bias and sewing some bias seams. So you want to take your bolt fold all the way over the selvages, because you want to be able to see this top fold that you brought over, and then you want to be able to see the bottom fold down here. So when we are cutting strips with the Stripology Rulers, we want to make sure that these two folds are perfectly parallel. And how I do that is I start with my bottom fold, I align that with one of the horizontal lines on the ruler, and then I just check to see if my top fold is parallel, if it's straight. It's looking really straight for me now. So I'm ready to cut. The second thing I check also is making sure that I'm going to trim all my raw edges in the first cut. We always start off by cutting through the 0, and then we make our cuts. Now, one thing I wanted to mention, we're going to be cutting some large squares and smaller squares from the background fabric. And the larger squares are cut at 14 inches, so your fabric needs to be 42 inches usable fabric for the width. And so for those of you, if you're working with skinnier fabrics, maybe it's not quite 42, you know what? You can use the selvage. So if you have a little bit of selvage within those 14-inch squares, don't worry about it, because we're going to trim things up. So just use the selvage, and if that is still, you still can't get it, even using the selvage, it's okay to go down to 13 3/4, or even 13.5-inch squares. You will most likely be able to make it work. So I'm all about trying to make it work. So then when you're cutting your strips, I start by cutting all my strips before I go back and cut all of my subcuts. So you would cut all your strips and then you would do your subcuts. So real quickly, I wanted to show you this one thing, because for the big squares, we're talking about 14-inch squares, and it's going to be really long for the rulers. So I actually fold it in half. So I bring this raw edge to the other raw edge so they're really straight. And now I have a fold again. So we're just going to use this fold just like we did before. Want to make sure there is a line on the fold, and I'm checking for where my raw edges are so I can catch that. Making sure that there's a line on the fold, because there's only one fold. This is really all we have to worry about in order to get our squares perfectly straight. And then we make the 2 cuts. So you should be able to get 3 squares out of a strip. So I've got my 2 squares here, and then I'm going to go ahead and press out that fold, and so I'll get a 3rd square out of this. So then for both the large squares and the smaller squares, we're going to take them and cut them apart diagonally. So I use my big ruler, just align the edge of the ruler with the 2 corners of the block. I like it because then all this grip underneath the Stripology ruler holds the fabric in place. And then I just very carefully cut along the edge of the ruler without moving anything. I turn and I'm going to cut the other angle. Same way, corner to corner, and make that cut. So all of your squares, whether they were the small or the large, are going to be cut into these triangles. So these triangles, because we cut them diagonally, they're going to have these 2 sides that are bias edges. So they're cut like diagonally across the grain. This is a straighter grain. So we're going to have both the large, and then you did the small. So this is as far as the background fabric. Of course, the instructions tell you to cut some 2.5-inch strips and other sizes for the borders, so you can get all that cut. But this is really, if you haven't cut any of your background, just focus on these 2 squares to start with. And then when it comes to your strips, or maybe you were using fat 8s, if you were using fat 8s or fat quarters, you want to start by cutting them into 2.5-inch strips. So whether they are double folded like this from full width fabric, or if you were cutting it from fat 8s, obviously they will just be single layer. When I'm subcutting my strips, I like to make stacks. So I am just using the lines on my cutting mat. Now this is a Creative Grids cutting mat that I helped design, especially this side is what I call the Stripology side. And it's great because it has a lot of horizontal lines that I can just use to line up my strips before the ruler goes on top. And you could place multiple strips in a stack, so you could be cutting a whole lot of strips at the same time. So up to 20 strips at the same time. So then I take my ruler, I lay it on top, and the ruler is really going to make the difference as to see if these strips are straight. So I use the lines on the ruler to make sure all the strips are straight, and if one gets a little off, I can always adjust it until I like what I'm seeing. They're all laying really straight, because then once they're all straight, I am ready to cut them all at the same time and get fully accurate pieces all the time. So now I have these done. What we're going to be cutting these into is 2 larger rectangles and actually, so because they're double layered, so we need a larger rectangle, a shorter rectangle, and a square from each half width strip. But because all of these were double sided, I'm getting double the amount. So I actually just went ahead and marked my cutting slits, since I've been doing a lot of the same cuts with my ruler stickers, which come in the 2 colors that we've been talking about. They're really going to be helpful today. So now I have, as you can see, the efficiency is great because I could have been cutting so many strips at the same time. So we have the larger rectangles, we have the smaller rectangles, and then we have all of our squares and just a little bit of leftover. So here we are ready for our first steps in the construction. So what you want to do first, I always talk about this in the first step when that is needed for a certain pattern, is to get organized. So what we want to do for each block, you want to pair up the 2 colors you want together in a block. Now if you're doing something like the colorway like the quilt behind me, which is just, I used a light and a dark strip, then it's fairly easy. You take a dark strip and a light strip and you get both large rectangles, both smaller rectangles, and then each color square. This goes into one block. Now if you're using multiple colors like my rainbow quilt that's in the corner, then you just pick 2 colors that need to kind of stand out from each other and pair them up. So I take a little time in pairing up which fabrics I want together in my quilt before I move any further, because then just it helps me stay organized. So alongside this, for each block, you will need 2 of the smaller triangles and then 2 of the larger. But for this segment, we're just going to work with the smaller ones. So we're going to just set the big ones aside and we're going to work with this one. We're also going to set the squares aside along with the large triangles. So just set these aside with the large triangles and to stay organized. So first step in the pattern, we're going to take these smaller rectangles and we're going to sew them to one of the sides of the triangles. So again, I have colored instructions, so they are kind of based on the colors that I'm going to be showing you here to make it easier for everybody. So we're calling these fabrics, it's just our A and B fabric. So our A's and B's, so we're going to take one of each of the triangles and we're going to take the shorter rectangle and we're going to just place them on top. And so that we want this 90-degree corner to be even with a 90-degree corner of the small triangle, like this. And you're going to notice that this is going to extend here, and that's okay. It needs to be longer. So same thing with this one. So this is still just going to make one block. So we have fabric A on one triangle and fabric B on the other. And then of course we're going to sew with our scant 1/4 inch seam. And what I mean by a scant 1/4 inch seam is just not a full accurate 1/4 inch, it's just a needle width or 2 over, so that once you sew your seam and then you fold your fabric over, it'll be a perfect 1/4 inch. So that's why we say scant 1/4 inch. Alright, so we're going to sew this down here, and one fun rule that if you have followed our sew-alongs before, I taught you this in both Elvira and Hope, we're going to go, Bob is going to be our friend today, B-O-B, which means bias on the bottom. Because these 2 edges are bias, we're going to put the bias on the bottom against the feed docks, because that will really help keep everything sturdy and stable as you sew. So you sew just a 1/4 inch seam, and even though there's only fabric underneath till about here, I usually just finish my seam all the way so that I can chain piece. And so once you have this sewn, it is time to press. So I recommend working on anywhere between 4 and 8 blocks at a time. So it's up to you. If you like to kind of take more time, I would probably just recommend doing about 4 blocks. So you can get started on picking your 4 and just work on those and until the next step. So we're going to sew this. So now we have it sewn here. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a demo on pressing, because we want to be a little bit more careful with the bias edges. So when we press for this step, And it doesn't matter if you have lights or dark fabrics, we're not even going to think about that. But we're going to press towards this rectangle that we added. So when pressing, let me give you the close-up here. I always start with setting my seam. So you want to go over those threads that you just sewed, because this actually presses down those threads and it's going to be easier to fold over. So then I use my fingers to first fold it out, and just fold it with my fingers a little bit. You don't want to push this way, because then you can start to stretch that bias. So I just fold it out, and then I make sure my iron, and I bring it and just bring it straight across here. I do not push it and stretch it any way, because we want to make sure to keep this as far from getting distorted. So just go straight across. I like to use steam, but it's up to you. See, I don't even have my steam on, but I like to use steam. So whatever works for you. But we're going to be pressing, so both pieces are going to be pressed this way. All right. So now that we have this is our step 1 of the pattern. We have our first units on, and then what we want to do, so with the longer rectangles, we want to put the opposite color. So if this is a fabric A, we want to put a fabric B on the other side. So again, the 90-degree corner, this goes all the way to here, and it extends on the other side. So we're going to sew this one on this side, and then this one goes on the B side. So when you're sewing this, I know this kind of would be odd a little bit, but we want to feed it into the machine this way, because we want to, again, have bias on the bottom. So it's a little weird starting here when you don't have fabric underneath, but just go slowly and make sure that little corner doesn't get eaten up, and you'll be just fine. Of course, you can always just start sewing here and sew all the way. It's up to you. For me, I just like to sew it from the end, because I like to chain piece. So now we're at this point. So I have this one sewn on here, and then the A fabric sewn on the B unit. So we have 2 matching, and it's time to press this one. And we're going to press this one differently. So naturally you would think that you'd be pressing this way, but we're not going to do that. We're actually going to press it towards this big triangle. So I like to flip it over this way. I set my seams again, and then fold it out, use my fingers, and then just bring my iron straight across, and then you'll get a really nice flat seam. So this seam is going this way, and this seam is going this way. Our goal is to kind of be in a circle and spin the seam. So again, this goes the same thing. We're going to set the seam. We're going to fold it out, push it with our fingers, and then straight across. All right, so now we have these 2 units, and we are done through the piecing of step 2. So that is all I'm going to tell you for this first segment, and I'm ready to answer any of your questions. Like I said, I want you to kind of think about, okay, how fast of a sewer am I? Do I still need to do some cutting? If you have all your things cut, maybe you can work on more than 4 to 6 blocks. Maybe you can work on 12 at a time. So just kind of start there, and then if we're not to 11 o'clock or not time for our next segment, you can always go back and make more. So like I said, I want you to be able to follow along stress-free and have a fun day. So all right, so a lot of questions, a lot of comments on the bob. Who is new to bob? It's a great tip, and it's going to be, we're going to talk about bob a lot today. All right, do you set the seams on everything or only on bias? I do it on everything. Whatever you're doing, always set the seam first, because it really helps you fold over that fabric. It compresses the threads and makes it all easier. So you will notice if you've ever tried to rip out stitches that you already pressed, you'll see how that thread changes on you. It gets compressed and it's harder to rip. How many do you chain pieces at a time? Just like I said, it's based on you. So when I'm working on a quilt, like when I was working on my blocks for this, I like to work at 10 at a time, 10 or 12. So if you're making the lap size, it's 23 blocks. So I worked on like half at a time. So I would chain piece those. You could do fewer. I like to do fewer this way because then I can still stay organized and I'm not, you know, kind of scrambling around for all my matching pieces. They can all kind of be organized and I just keep track, still doing the chain piecing. And it can be as few as 4 to 6. So whatever works for you. Do you have a wool pressing mat? Yes, so this one is a wool pressing mat that I was showing you on. I don't have it over on my iron stand. I have one that I can pop up if I feel I need to. But for the most part, I don't use it for that. But it's really helpful when you're doing blocks that have a lot of seams. You want them really nice and flat. Okay, did you say there is a partial seam in the pattern? Nope, no partial seams. All right, so what thread do I piece with? I piece with an Aurifil 50 weight cotton thread. That's my favorite piecing thread. Is really nice and fine and just works really great for me and my machines. Ready to hear your story in regards to your fabric choices. All right, so here's the story. So I showed you on Tuesday that I had chosen this woven background. I just really love the peppered cottons and the texture, and it really has that natural feel to them. So then we were kind of going back and forth what fabric. I had too many ideas. So I decided to make this because this first quilt that I made was so personal and I wanted to make this one even more personal. So this is pretty much our quilt, mine and Mr. Honey Producer. Well, we forgot to introduce Mr. Honey Producer to those of you that are new. So from behind the curtain, you should say hi.
Hi everybody.
He's
Happy
here
Harmony.
running the show. So this is our personal story. So all the fabrics are kind of personal. So either, so I have some music notes because he is a musician. I have some numbers in this one because I deal with numbers all the time in quilting. There's some runes fabrics that are, of course, Icelandic runes. I have some puffins. We have some African prints in there. There's going to be mostly black and white or those two tones. But then I decided to throw in just a few purple, so it'll be some blocks will have a little bit of purple because the color purple has a big prominence in our life, especially Mr. HP. So I'm excited to see how it all comes together. But each and every fabric has a little connection, so that's what I'm excited about. Any other questions on that?
Someone said, do you pin?
Do I pin? So I do not, but feel free to do what you want. I will tell you where I pin. So as we move further on, I try to use as few pins as possible. That's just me. But you should, if you want to pin, it is a bias edge. So of course, if you want to pin it. But I felt like these were not that long. They worked for me, especially since I treated my fabrics with a little best press and starch. So, okay, when using a jelly roll folded as you did, you will get 2 identical blocks. Yes, exactly. So from the strips that I cut, that was enough for 2 blocks. And so, because 1 full strips really makes 2 blocks, but of course you want 2 different fabrics. So that's why half strips work well too. All right. All right. Used to be a pinner, not so much, somebody said. Why do your pieces look smaller? I don't know. Probably everything looks smaller on TV or bigger on TV. I don't know how that works. Doesn't it always say that you're bigger on TV? That's interesting. Okay. Do you recommend the wool pressing mat? I do like it. I don't use it like all the time, but I do like it. It's really nice and portable to grab along. So I've considered when I make my new pressing board to have that wool mat underneath a coating, which I think would be great because sometimes it gets a little sticky, so I don't like pressing like borders or anything long on it, but so I've thought about doing that. When you start designing a pattern, do you start on paper or do you start with fabric and just start cutting and sewing? I do both. Sometimes it's a fully formed idea, so I go straight to my computer and draft it. Sometimes it's an idea that I have to try and see if it works, because a lot of my patterns are like I piece and then I cut and I piece together again and switch things around. So sometimes it's that way, and so it goes both ways. Sometimes I sketch a little bit before just to not forget the idea, but most times I go straight to my computer to draft the pieces. Okay. Where did you find the puffin fabric? I lived in Iceland for a couple of years. Would like to get some puffin fabric. Well, this particular one was a part. Oh, I don't have it here. Particular one was a part of the Iona bundle that we just got in and pretty much sold out just as fast. But it's most of the times I'm able to find it from Louis and Irene, some of their fabrics. All right. When will the video be ready? After the live? So instantly. So once we go off air, it saves right away. So if you are on YouTube, you can go straight and find them. And on Facebook, we put them into a special Harmony playlist as well. But make sure you check that blog, so there'll be a link there too. I wanted to talk about the playlist. Kate is saying, thank you, Mr. Honey Producer, for the playlist. Listened to it last night when I was working on masks for my niece's wedding. That's awesome. So the playlist has a variety of songs, of course. Many have, many of the songs have really great lyrics and meaning to what we're doing today and connection to harmony. And he, has put together a great variety of music. I then had to throw in just a few songs that, will get you going and moving and shaking a little bit, of course. So I wanted to just put out a disclaimer that if there are any bad words in the songs, because he's very stringent about that he doesn't put any songs that have any kind of, cussing in them. But there may be a word or two, is basically your anatomy, but that's my fault. So if that offends you, just skip to the next song. But exactly. I thought we were all adults, so it's just too good of a song. But if you come across it, so then it's all on me. It's not his choice. So just wanted to put that out there. Everything that you like is mine. So the playlist, if you're wondering what we're talking about, we put together a Spotify playlist, and you can find a link to that on the blog. And you don't have to buy Spotify or anything. It's a free app. You can just click straight on the link, and it opens up in your browser. You can play the music. So Kathleen said, my son is a drummer. I'm making his quilt for Down syndrome awareness. He has Down syndrome. Mr. Honey Producer and music drum material you would recommend. Drum material. He's a drummer too, so drum material is hard to find. I have found maybe in 10 years, maybe 1 or 2 prints that have drums on it. That's it. But a lot of music. So he's also a music producer, so he does a lot of the different parts of the music production. Ellen says, do you use a consistent thread color too, or do you have a favorite or a full color to use? Yeah, so my favorite piecing colors, I have 3 favorite piecing colors that I use. So one is a really light gray, 2600, called Dove. And so I carry these 3 colors in the store. I actually carry 6 different colors in the store, and those are kind of my basic piecing colors. My main 3, it's a light gray and a dark gray and a sandy color. So one is called Sand, one is called Pewter, and one is called Dove. And then the other 3 that are in the store are kind of the in-betweens. So sometimes you have a little bit of need of an in-between, but those are the most used. I probably use the 2600 the most, the Dove. Is it okay to use a 60 weight thread used for my paper piecing? Oh yes, sure. It's just a little bit lighter weight than the 50, so that's all good. What if my fabric shifts upward and doesn't line up at the top? Can I just trim to even or rip out and redo? So I would say you want to make sure that you are even on the top. So if it starts sliding, I would say then just use pins. So it depends how much. You do not want to trim this part yet. We're going to trim the block in the end. So I would not trim. So even if you shift a little bit down, so when we're going to then just cheat it, pretend that there's fabric all the way up. So I can show you tricks on that. But I would not trim it in this stage of the game. So just if it's really off, then I would rip out and re-sew it. But if you feel like you have some shifting going on with your machine, just put a couple of more pins. So that might be better. Do you use best press when ironing the seams? No. So I treat my fabrics all before you want to do that, before you start cutting them. So then you can cut them, and then you don't need to use best press. If you feel like it's not laying flat, I'd rather just use a little water, or I use steam. but I would not be doubling down on the best press. You don't really need that. That's kind of a waste, because if you even dampen it, you know, you will reactivate that. So Elisa said, does the wool mat start to smell? I've heard this, that depending on the brand that they smell, I think it's mostly first when you start using it. And I've heard also others that you can put a little spray of like essential oils in it to get a little, it doesn't bother me. I'm from Iceland. I wore wool sweaters all growing up, and when wool sweaters got wet, they smell like wool, so it really doesn't bother me. I'm really very used to it. So if it bothers you, maybe there's some tricks. I know there's a lot of tips out there for, you know, treating it, but I think it's more so in the beginning. Oh, where can we get a shirt like yours? Oh, I have a variety of shirts to show you throughout the day, and this one is amazing. I actually printed out exactly where this is from, because I wanted to be able to tell you exactly. So this is a shirt that's sold by Urban Ventures, which is a Minneapolis-based group. So Urban Ventures' recent work has focused on crisis response to support families and help small business owners get back in business and revitalize the local economy in South Minneapolis. So unique among the various relief efforts in the area, Urban Ventures has engaged in project teams made out of volunteers and staff. They work alongside 70 local partners to address opportunity gaps in academics, nutrition, physical activity, parenting resources, and more, all with the overarching goal to prepare and send every youth in our neighborhood to college or post-secondary education. So of course, with the events and a lot of the damage in South Minneapolis, so this kind of has also been to support those businesses and get them up and running again, and get the community places up and running again. So it was all a fundraising effort. So it is urbanventures.org. So you can, I think you can still buy them on urbanventures.org. So.
Did you show how to cut without this stripology?
So I will be showing you more on cutting with the other rulers, but I feel like just cutting the strips and cutting your background, I'm sure you're good with regular rulers. So that's why I didn't do the demo with regular rulers, but you know, you can of course use regular rulers. I will explain once we go into trimming and all that, and I'll do that with multiple different tools. So once we get into the next steps. All right, I think we're good to go. Aren't you excited to get going? So like I said, we're going to have live winners. So the winners from the first segment, I will announce at the beginning of the next segment. So which will be, now it's 9:40 here. So it's going to be in about an hour and 20 minutes. You will have an hour and 20 minutes to kind of get started on your step 1 and step 2. Any other questions you think that are...
What reliable iron?
What reliable iron am I using? So the one I showed on film is an older version. I have Velocity is my favorite. So that's an older Velocity. I have another new one over there. That's the one I carry in the store. And that one is also a Velocity, just a newer model. It does have an auto shut off, but you can actually override that if you don't like your irons to shut off. I tend to just keep it on because it warms up pretty fast if it does shut off, but I tend to sew and then stand up and press all the time, so I kind of keep my iron going all the time. And I like to have that little security of it, that it's going to shut off if I do forget to unplug it. But that's just me.
So can you post where you got your shirts later?
Yes, I will post links to the shirts. That's a great idea. I will definitely do that. And it's really cool. You read about these organizations, what they do with fully volunteer staff. So that's great. Well, thank you all for this first part. I think it's time to take a big sip of water, and maybe we'll move into something a little bit stronger later in the day. But I'm excited to see your progress. So I'll be answering your questions, you know, if I find any that needed addressing, and checking in on your progress in Gudrun's Quilt Crew on Facebook. But this is it for now, and I will see you in about an hour and 20 minutes.